Into brute.
Hi, everyone. This is Amelia Duran, your host of The Porthole to Justice, and I am here with the breaking story. It is January 20th, 2019. I have two stories that are breaking in the Porthole to Justice and Social Media News Network, CPS News Network. A foster placement couple allowed to rape 6 children for approximately 20 years. Apparently the children were given an ultimatum: no sex, no food. The wife of the perpetrator, Clarence Garcia, would actually give the girls birth control. The wife reports these child rapes, and the cops and CPS failed to do anything for these children. For 20 years this went on. Clarence Garcia. So that, you can check that story out in Social Media News Network. The other breaking story is Minnesota Senate Republican Caucus. Scott Stillman, former manager of the state's digital forensics lab, gives shocking testimony about child care fraud during the subcommittee Child Care Assess and Affordability hearing. And I'm going to play that testimony.
If you want to ask me some questions, I'll do the best that I can for that.
Representative Albright.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Stillman, I watched the testimony that you gave before the Senate panel earlier this year. Fairly compelling. I think it raises a lot of questions. I think for the sake of this committee, I'm going to ask you maybe some questions, maybe just to review the activities and or the evidence that you saw during your time with your department. And then I'd like to lead into a few other questions after that.
Go ahead, Mr. Stillman.
Madam Chair, Representative Albright, sure, that's fine. What would you like to ask me?
So what types of activities or evidence did you see in your investigation?
Again, in my role, analyzing digital evidence, I would examine the computers, cloud storage, cell phones. I found a lot of the data on computers was basically there to appease or fulfill DHS requirements, but most of the evidence was on the cell phones. Wire transfers, money going overseas, multiple bank accounts, plans, instructions, money going to foreign countries, pictures of prominent people, things that really caused me great concern for the security of our nation and the CCAP program and the Medicaid fraud program.
Madam Chair.
Representative Albright.
During your investigation or now, can you provide verifiable evidence to support the claims that you made in that testimony?
Madam Chair, Representative Albright, absolutely, yes. There are multiple witnesses who have documents and videos strongly supporting the evidence. And I would encourage Mr. Nobles to consider interviewing the 12 Office of Inspector General investigators and their supervisor managers. They have actual evidence. I've been gone for a year, so if you want current, you want reliable, you want verifiable, you want authoritative evidence of money going overseas, massive fraud, you have to talk to those people. And I would encourage Mr. Nobles to speak to those people independently without DHS supervisors present. I've been told that those people are under extreme duress right now. I've been told that they are under extreme harassment and retaliation, and they're afraid. They're afraid to speak right now. They're afraid for their jobs. They're afraid for their reputations. So you have to consider that these people are the number one source of evidence, and they're willing to speak to you, but they can't.
Mr. Stillman, did you write a detailed analysis of your report and your investigation?
Mr. Stillman?
Madam Chair, Representative Albright, I'm not sure I understand it. Did I write a...
Did you prepare a report based upon the investigation that you performed?
I've prepared a couple of reports, yes.
And who were they delivered to?
I prepared a fairly detailed report to the FBI, Minnesota FBI, and I copied it to Jeff Sessions.
And did you report or provide that report to anyone at DHS?
I did not.
May I ask why?
During our investigations, we found indications during seized bank records that indicated monies from the daycares under criminal investigation were providing monies to politicians. Both Minnesota and federal is my understanding. And I didn't want those people alerted, so I went to the FBI. And that evidence exists. I gave the FBI the location of that evidence. I told them who was the custodian of that evidence. I told them that that money involved multiple people. And I wanted to keep it between myself and the FBI. I didn't want someone to destroy that evidence.
Madam Chair, Mr. Stillman, what is your present professional position?
Mr. Stillman?
Madam Chair, Representative Albright, I am unemployed, seeking employment, which has been fairly difficult for me.
So you no longer work for the Office of Investigative General?
That is correct.
And when did you separate service?
Approximately March 4th, 2018.
Was that an amicable separation?
Madam Chair, Representative Albright, no, it was not. I was under extreme duress. I was having my duties removed from me. I was demoted from my managerial position, and I was being, you can't imagine what it's like to have powerful people go after you. You're all alone, and you got some of the most powerful people in the world who use all their powers in the world to destroy you. And that's what they did to me. I couldn't take it anymore. I just resigned. I wasn't going to stay there anymore. It was the writing was on the wall that I was going to have to leave, so I just thought, it's time to leave.
Have you requested any federal investigation other than what you've already declared to close?
Madam Chair, Representative Albright, yes, I did request the Department of Justice and Homeland Security to investigate. I gave them a report. I documented my reasons. I thought it was very detailed. And I did, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Stillman. Does any other members have questions for Mr. Stillman? Representative Krisha?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one quick question, Mr. Stillman. I'm curious, you mentioned money going to politicians or elected officials. Was that campaign contributions? Were you able to identify? And the only reason I ask is because that would certainly show up in a campaign finance report.
The individuals, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, Representative Krisha, the individuals who could give you that detailed information are willing to speak to you, but they are prevented from doing that at this time. If you wanted that information, I would strongly ask you to speak to the Office of Inspector General. There's 12 investigators. If they spoke to you about that, they could answer that question. I cannot answer that. I don't know if it was just money or contributions. But that evidence does exist. It has been preserved, and it is there for your review if you can get your hands on it.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Krisha. Does anybody else have any questions? Representative Albright?
Madam Chair, Mr. Stillman, you just said if you can get your hands on it. What would prevent either the OLA or some other federal law enforcement agency from getting their hands on it?
Madam Chair, Representative Albright, this whole issue came about because an Office of Inspector General investigator, actually 2 investigators, put together a PowerPoint presentation to Minnesota law enforcement, state, local, federal, and it detailed in great detail the daycare CCAP fraud in Minnesota. This alarmed certain federal investigators, and that's how this came to light. To my knowledge, that PowerPoint presentation has been deleted or destroyed or withheld. I have not seen it, and no one can produce it at this point. So I would ask that you may want to pursue that, and if it's deleted on somebody's computer, it can be recovered. I would also say that a number of reports have been written, not by me, but from senior managers at DHS. Some of these reports have gone to the OLA. I would encourage you to get a copy of those. My understanding is some of the contents in some of those reports, the individual who drafted them demanded that he delete significant portions of it because it was too controversial. That individual is under incredible retaliation at this point, and this is verifiable. All you have to do is get a hold of these investigators and interview them. And they have not been interviewed to this point. And I would ask, I'm not a state employee anymore, I'm a taxpayer. These people stood up for something that was right, to defend our country, to defend our state, to do their job, the job that they were tasked with. And I appeal to you. Is there some way you can protect them? Is there anything you can do? I know we have a new administration coming in. I'd like to ask the new administration, are you going to protect these people? Can you promise the taxpayers that there's going to be transparency? We've had data and emails that have come to your desks, 12 pages that have been, 12 pages, 1 paragraph, the rest is redacted. What kind of transparency is that for our government, for the taxpayer? This has the potential to be Minnesota's Watergate. I stand by my allegations. I stand by my claims about the $100 million. It could potentially be higher than that. I stand by my claims that this money is going overseas into hands that are probably going to be very detrimental to the United States. I went to the FBI, I went to the Department of Justice, I went to the Homeland Security. I've got no reaction from them whatsoever. I don't understand why. So my appeal to you is, how are you going to protect those people from powerful people? I'm sorry, Madam Chair, diverged, I went off on a tangent there, but I apologize, so.
It's okay. As a matter of fact, Mr. Stillman, the lieutenant-elect, Representative Peggy Flanagan, sits on this committee. As you can see, she is not here. However, we can offer to make a copy of the audio for her to listen to so she can get filled in and carry your voice into the next administration. And I know she's very passionate about child care assistance, and I'm sure she's going to want to protect the integrity of that. And so I am hopeful with this new administration they will take the fraud seriously because this is not going to be swept underneath the rug, people. We are going to continue working on that. I know my colleagues are very invested in making sure those who absolutely need the dollars, that those dollars are there for them. Mr. Stillman, can you just walk us through, though, how people steal and transfer money? I'm still trying to grasp how this happens. And this isn't just a Minnesota thing. All over the nation, child care assistance fraud is rampant. You can do just a simple Google search, and you've got tons of stories to choose from, many of which happen right here in Minnesota. I was just refreshing my memory about an individual a couple years ago. Members here and the public. She stole, between her and her husband, with the child care, she had a child care business. Her husband had or they both had a home health care business. About $4 million were frauded. The arrests were made. There was a bail set for $1 million on the woman. And the argument was $1 million was too much. So it went down to a $200,000 to post. Some individuals believe that was just a little too high, that perhaps a flight risk could be at play. And you know what happened? She's nowhere to be found. Absolutely nowhere to be found. There is a movie, Enemy of the State, with Will Smith. Will Smith could not get very far without individuals knowing where he was, and I still am wondering how in today's world an individual who has defrauded the system by $4 million is just disappeared into thin air. But anyway, so if you could just walk us through that process of what you're seeing, maybe, you know, we can take some of that to the next legislative body and fix some of these issues.
Madam Chair, the daycare process typically requires that the provider of the daycare service keep some type of a log. Typically it could be electronic, it could be paper, but we found that those are either not kept or that they're filled in, they're forged. We placed video cameras around these daycares, the front door, the back door, all the exits. And we've watched the videos, and I would encourage you, each of you, to go and see those videos. They're available at the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension in the Fusion Center, or some of the, particularly the adjudicated cases, you can see those. You'll see videos where the door is locked, the business is closed, and nobody comes. And then you look at the billing records and they billed for 100 children. They'll bill on a Sunday, they'll bill on a holiday, they'll bill on days that they're closed. They may have 5 children, they may have 10, according to the video. And they'll bill for 80, 90 to 100. None of the cases we investigated were under $1 million. The laws and the statutes really need to be gone over. I think, additionally, the Office of Inspector General needs to be removed from the Department of Human Services because the people who are controlling the process and the policies are the ones who are investigating them. That'd be like a police chief accused of misconduct investigating himself and then issuing a report that there's nothing wrong. How can you have any kind of credibility to that? The other issues are we've had cases where I'd have computers come in, search cell phones from a search warrant. And the search warrants are on file. You can verify this. And then the investigators would come in and they would say, there's a politician that got involved in this investigation, and we get the computers back, and we're going to go a different route. $18 million fraud. I checked the records. That business hasn't been shut down. They actually expanded. Another, October 2016, search warrant executed. The individual had been convicted already, had a prior conviction, felony conviction. And I processed the computers, 30 computers and cell phones. I processed them. And when I tried to give the evidence to the investigator, he said, I can't accept that evidence. Well, why not? Because a very well-known, prominent politician told me I can't continue the investigation because that individual contributed to their campaign. And I checked, as of last week, the Hennepin County records on that, and that individual has no convictions. And you can go and get those search warrants, and you can go get the police reports to verify that, and I can give you the names of the people, 5 witnesses who will verify this. Before I left, I was notified to prepare for a $34 million transportation fraud. That's part of CCAP. A $34 million transportation fraud. They told me it was going to be 5 cities, massive. Gear up for it. Get ready. Recruit other investigators to help you because we're going to do the search warrant simultaneously. That search warrant never transpired. And I don't know why. And I don't know what reason it was for being shut down. But the Minnesota taxpayer pays for these programs. They deserve to have some transparency and accountability. And when I was a police officer, I was warned frequently, you're going to have a massive amount of power. And you're going to have to be accountable for that. So when you go out and you have that kind of power, there has to be accountability. So I'm a taxpayer, and I know there are taxpayers watching this. So I ask a question. Do the politicians and their officials who control these programs, are they accountable just like police officers? They have more power than police officers. And I haven't seen the accountability. I've seen redacted emails. I've seen pictures of politicians on cell phones. And I wonder if the public has a right to see that. It's their money. And I guess I'm asking you, is there accountability amongst the people who run these programs? Because these programs are being used against us. I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Thank you. 2 questions for me, and then Representative Albright has one, and then we're going to move on, okay?
Yes.
Sometimes people bill kids for kids who aren't there at the child care center, right?
Yes.
So have you ever heard or seen of providers ever paying the parents kickbacks for enrolling their children, even though their children never actually attend the center? And how does one actually get kids to sign up when they're not going to be attending?
Madam Chair, I have seen videos of that. I have participated with investigators who have gone deep into that question. I can say it occurs. I can say that innocent immigrants are often exploited because of this, to their harm, because they're given a fraction of what they should be getting. They're not getting the daycare that they need. If you want details, though, I would encourage you to speak to the 12 Office of Inspector General CCAP investigators. They could give you example after example after example, including videos of that.
Thank you. Representative Albright.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Stillman, question for you with regard to kind of the money flows, and you've talked about it a little bit, but In some cases, the money is provided to the daycare, but I'm wondering if you can help me appreciate how to your assertion it gets overseas or it gets to other places, how it might end up in a political campaign fund, or help me understand what you've seen or how that has happened as you've seen forensically.
Madam Chair, Representative Albright, I've seen wire transfers and directions, individuals giving directions to other individuals to wire money to different accounts. The Office of Inspector General has numerous search warrants from banks showing the path of that money going to Dubai. I would encourage you, sir, look at those search warrants. They are available to you at the Office of Inspector General. They have been preserved. As far as the money going to campaigns, I can't say it's gone to a campaign. I don't know if it went to an individual as a cash payoff or it went to their campaign. I don't know. But if it influenced that politician, as a taxpayer, I think that's wrong. And I think that should be transparent. But if you want to see that information, sir, again, the evidence that you're looking for is available and is verifiable at the Office of Inspector General. And if you haven't seen that yet, I would ask for it.
Madam Chair, Mr. Stillman, when you did your forensic audit, obviously you have privy to the phone numbers and the smartphones of these individuals. But are you able and are you asserting that these phone numbers are attributable to specific individuals that you know by name?
Madam Chair, Representative Albright, we processed that evidence and put it into link analysis analytics. So if you want the names of those individuals, where we could find that, it is available in the Office of Inspector General records. In some cases, yes, I did know where it was going. Chair Franzen mentioned a case, the DECO case. I worked that case. I went through millions of records, 34 computers and servers and cell phones. It was the first case that we really got, and I was inundated. I worked hours. I worked nights and weekends to process that, to filter out the evidence. And I found spreadsheets in there from the owner of the daycare going to an individual who's been convicted of terroristic actions. Those records are in the DECO record, and you can go out and get those spreadsheets. You want them, they're at Ramsey County Sheriff's Office. They're on file there. They're on file at the Ramsey County Attorney's Office, and the Office of Inspector General has them as well.
You said they're on record at the Ramsey County Attorney's Office?
That's correct,
and
yes.
Where else?
The Ramsey County Sheriff's Office should have a copy. The BCA, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, should have a copy as well. The BCA contracts to have officers on scene at the Department of Human Services to help them with their Office of Inspector General investigations. I would highly encourage you to speak to those officers. Go into their office. Ask to see the spreadsheets. Ask to see the diagrams of the organized crime. Ask to see the 4-page, 2-column long list of suspect daycares. Ask to see their reports. Go to the Fusion Center and see those videos. The evidence is staggering. It's all there. But you haven't been shown it. It hasn't been given to you.
Thank you, Mr. Stillman, and thank you for coming today. Certainly is not an easy topic to discuss. We thank you for coming forward.
That was Scott Stillman and a testimony at Minnesota Senate Republican Caucus. This is a national security issue, and the government is at war with its own citizens. Our government, Child Protective Services, is kidnapping, drugging, and raping our babies and our children. Every state across the nation. And I I encourage everybody, folks, if you're tuning in, join the CPS News Network exclusively on Facebook. It is our project to shut down Child Protective Services this year by 2020. You can help. You can participate in those efforts by sharing and socializing the stories that we profile in the CPS News Network and Social Media News Network. We're also have Anti-Human Trafficking Task Force, NWO Freedom Fighters. You can check all of these blogs out on Facebook exclusively. And I thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe to my podcast on Spreaker.com and join a live chat. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you for tuning in.